Hello everyone. I'm Latvian Grumstrat to Neiksans, and it's that time again to do the next edition of my boot camp. So, what's a boot camp? This is a series of my educational streams covering various kinds of topics related to chess, obviously, and this one is going to be specifically um, honoring the upcoming World Championship match between the reigning world champion Magnus Carlsen and Ian Nepomniachtchi, who are going to start their World Championship match next Friday. I mean, officially, I think the opening ceremony is next Wednesday, but I mean, the first game is next Friday. So 1 week from now, the championship match is going to go live. The starting time of the games is going to be 1:30 p.m. Central European time. For Americans, I guess it's going to be awfully early in the morning, but everybody, when is going to wake up, the game already will be going on. Yeah, so in this bootcamp, I will look back at the played games between Magnus Carlsen and Ian Nepomniachtchi before. So in total, they have played, how many games was it? 13 games. 13 classical games. So what I didn't really count is all of the online games. Yeah, so naturally, Magnus being the best player in the world and Ian Nepomniachtchi as one of the strongest, they have played a number of times against each other and a lot of occasions in the online super tournaments. Yeah, so as you probably know, both of the players are participants of the Meltwater Champions Tour series. They played many times in various these online tournaments, but still, I'm gonna have a look at the classical games which I've played over the board. Hello, Peanut. Right. So we'll start maybe before I switch to the game very quickly. I'm gonna show you where you can find all of the information about the championship. Like I said, it starts next Friday. So if you would type in the chat the command !match, it's going to generate you the link to this page of chess.com, which has all of the necessary information that you need to know about the match. So if you don't know who are the players, I assume you do. Magnus Carlsen is the reigning world champion. Ian Nepomniachtchi is the challenger after winning the FIDE Candidates tournament, which you might remember was held in two parts in St. Petersburg. No, sorry, Yekaterinburg, not St. Petersburg. And they're going to be battling for a prize fund of 2 million. And as you can see, some really familiar faces are going to cover the championship match here on chess.com. I mean, they're really star-studded commentary teams in all of the sites, right? I mean, chess.com, Fabi Carano, the previous World Championship challenger, is going to be bringing some really inside information about what does it feel to play a World Championship match. Yeah, and then of course you can find also the final standings of the FIDE Candidates tournament. As you see, Nepomniachtchi won it in great style against Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, who finished in the second place. And also it does mention one really interesting fact. Am I going to be participating in this year's tournament, is asking a chat. I'm not sure which tournament do you mean. Not this one, definitely. I would love to, but I don't think they're gonna let me. So it's quite interesting that Nepomniachtchi actually leads in the score of the resultive games against each other. Nepomniachtchi, out of 13 games, has won 4. Of the classical games, he has won 4 games against Magnus Carlsen's 1. However, it's really important to note that Nepomniachtchi won 2 games at the start when they were playing at youth level, World Championships, European Championships under 12, under 14. Nepomniachtchi was stronger, but Carlsen obviously caught up and became the strongest player in the world. And the last game, which finished with a victory by either the players, it was Magnus Carlsen who beat Ian Nepomniachtchi. So currently the score is 4-1 with 8 draws, but I'm not really sure if this is going to play any role in the match. And they're playing in Dubai Exhibition Center. There's already a huge team of the FID officials setting up the playing location. If you're closely following the social media, you can see some really familiar faces setting up the playing venue to make it as comfortable and as exciting for both players and the participants and the viewers as possible. And also there's going to be a visiting group from some of the most promising young players in the world. It's part of the reward of winning this Julius Baer Challenges Chess Tour, which was organized by Chess24 previously. So they're going to also visit the championship on site and see the players in action. Maybe they have some access to some inside info. I don't really know. Yeah, so here's the full schedule, and you can find obviously times. Like I said, for Americans, this is going to be awfully early. So my deepest condolences to chess.com's official commentators who are US based. It's going to be really, really early morning. But for Europeans, 1:30 Central European time. And what I find it really to be interesting is that the games, they're going to be mostly played on weekends. And this is, I think, a great change. I mean, pretty much every single weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. This means you won't miss any action, meaning you have to work, you have to go somewhere on Saturday and Sunday. The players are going to be still playing. Naturally, there's also going to be a rest day after every, I wanted to say after every 3 games, but as you see, the rest day is changing. And the time control, now this is something really special. I'm not sure. Yep, here it is. And the time control is going to be really grueling because it's 2 hours for 40 moves, followed by 60 minutes for next 20 moves, and then 15 minutes for the rest of the game. Plus 30 seconds after move 61. So I think this is really exciting because we could see some crazy time trouble action because you are not going to get extra 30 seconds after move 1. It's just after move 61, so you have to use the time of 120 minutes or 2 hours really wisely. Otherwise, this is going to generate definitely some action. Right, and of course, as you know, Magnus Carlsen became a champion after beating Vishwanathan Anand, the Indian chess legend, back in 2013. He defended the title in 2014 again against Anand, and then he played the World Championship match in New York. I think it was in New York, against Sergei Karyakin. A very, very close match, which finished in the after 12 games in a tie. And actually, Carlsen, for the first time, was losing after, how many games was it? 8 games, I think. Maybe I mixed it up. He came back, he fought back, and then he won the tiebreak. And also against Fabiana Caruana, the official match after 12 games finished with a draw, and again Magnus Carlsen won the tiebreak. So this time they're going to play 14 games, and it was really interesting to see some discussion or a poll, so to speak, on social media that how many scoring games there are going to be in the match, and many people were optimistic that it's going to be a lot. So it's something like 4 games or maybe higher. I mean, I'm not really sure because I think at the World Championship match the stakes are the highest, but as we are going to follow the games between these 2 players, they're never boring. I mean, they don't have pretty much ever short draws. There's always some action. And of course, I think it's fair to note that Carlsen and Nepomniatchtchi, they're friends. So Nepomniatchtchi used to be in Carlsen's team. And he was helping him in World Championship matches. So this time they're going to play against each other. So really interesting who is going to be victorious. All right, now let's move on to the first game. And they played it in 2002. 2002, which was European Youth Championship under 12 in Peninsula. And at the time, Nepomniatchtchi was higher rated. He was the favorite. And as he said in an interview, he didn't know who this guy from Norway was. I mean, who is this guy? I mean, he was just playing normal chess. Then his opponent blundered something. So he won the game. And who would have known that after good 19 years later, they are going to be fighting these two kids. They're going to be fighting for the World Championship title. I mean, it's quite unbelievable. So the actual game, this time, Carlsen started with the Alekhine defense. Cannot really say much about it. I guess it's playable. E5, knight f3, d4. This is pretty much quite a solid way for white to continue. Usually, I play d4, d6, c4, fighting for the center, but knight f3, d4, this is completely playable. Hello, Annette. How are you doing? So, d takes on e5, Carlsen decided very quickly to relinquish pressure. Maybe one of the reasons is that there is some potential for a gambit. For example, let's say knight c6, I can play c4, knight b6, and you really need to be aware what is happening after e6. Now, you cannot take bishop e6 because there's going to be fork with d5 and black loses a piece. And after f takes, knight c3, bishop d3, knight g5, here is a good room for a nice gambit. And Nepomniatchtchi, always in the contrary to Magnus Carlsen, always has been the sharp player. He is often gambling. He doesn't mind going into sharp positions. And at least Carlsen, at the first part of his career, was the positional player. Now, naturally, Carlsen has evolved, right? I mean, he is now playing really sharp games, pushing his luck and the opponents to the limit. But he used to be really solid and positional player. And Nepomniatchtchi always was the one who was really bringing some extra excitement to the table. So d takes on e5, knight takes on e5, g6 was played by Magnus Carlsen. Knight e7, this could be dangerous. I'm pretty sure that Nepomniatchtchi would play something like this. Knight f7, king f7, queen h5, king e6. I think this is just not a good line for black. So the black king is walking and the white has a very strong attack. Oh, yeah. So this didn't happen. Actually, now black plays g6 with the intentions to put the bishop on g7, bishop c4, c6, solidify him against any queen f3 ideas, knight c3, bishop e6, short castle. And this is, by the way, very typical Nepomniatchtchi, especially at the youth level. As you're going to see some of the future games, he was always trying to go for some tricks. So after short castle, he willingly offers black to play knight takes on c3, meaning what's the idea, right? B takes, bishop c4, knight c4, and black is happy. But the idea here is that after a knight takes on c3, white has an amazing resource, bishop takes on e6, and you're going to take the queen on d1 because that's mate in 1. And this was really typical Nepomniatchtchi at the start. I mean, I won't really claim that he's not playing like this still, but that's the idea. So that's the idea. And I think he did it willingly. I mean, I don't really know, but I think that suits the picture of how I treat him as a chess player, being really resourceful, tricky, and setting very interesting traps. So Carlsen naturally didn't fall into this. Knight e7, queen f3 was played by Nepomniatchtchi. Maybe today he would play something like bishop d5, bishop d5, take on d5, and knight d3 with a solid plus. c3, bishop f4, and I think white's position is to be preferred because for the Carlsen structure, b2, c3, d4, and the knight on d3 is the perfect setup against b5, a5, b4 setups, and white can simply focus on playing at the king side. Either way, this didn't happen really. So Nepomniachtchi played queen f3. He was looking for some tricks, attacked the knight on d5. Bishop g7 was calmly responded by Carlsen, and apparently indeed any bishop d5 now don't work because after bishop d5 black has at the least an intermezzo move, knight takes on e5, and only then he captures back the bishop on d5. So that's why rook e1 was played to strengthen the center, queen g3. This, I think, was not a good move by Nepomniachtchi, and very quickly Carlsen took over the game. Knight e5, knight takes on c3. Now, I'm not sure if Nepomniachtchi missed something or not, but bishop e6 loses very nicely due to knight e2 check, and you cannot take on e2 because that's a mate on d1. So maybe he missed this from the far, and after queen c3, bishop c4, queen c4, queen d5, it was already Carlsen's way to take over the game. So again, we're following their very first game they played at being 12-year-olds. One of the strongest players in their age group in the European Youth Chess Championship. So queen e2 was responded by Nepomniachtchi because after queen d5, c takes, c6, rook c8, if somebody can be better here naturally, it's only black. So he went back, was trying to set up some kind of defensive position, seeking a counterplay at the queen side with a5, but very soon he found out that he's worse. So queen e4, Nepomniachtchi offered the queen trade. Carlsen wisely declined because this is something that he can do whenever he wants, and maybe the queen on d7 is going to be at some point simply be a better piece. So c3 stopping any rook d4 ideas, h3. White is essentially waiting. And the critical moment arose here. So Nepomniachtchi wouldn't sit and wait, and this is really characteristic to him as a player. He never is gonna sit patiently, meaning sit in a passive defense while hoping that the storm is gonna pass and everything is gonna be good. He should know that here he's worse, but at least he managed to organize some kind of a counterplay at the queen side. So he pushed a5, a6, and now this pawn on a7 might become a weakness at some point later. So Carlsen played c5, which is a natural move to play c4, strengthen the rook, and attack the pawn on a6, and the critical moment arose here. Carlsen played queen d5, and I guess the idea was he was still confident because he could have done it earlier. He could have traded the queens to solidify his position. This time he decided that it's going to work again. But something has changed at the queen side. Since Nepomniachtchi has pushed the pawn on a6, now black's queenside pawns become a real target, and queen d5 actually is the first mistake that Carlsen did. What he had to do, he had to play something like rook d5, queen b6, keep the queen protecting the pawns, and maybe then try to push forward these pawns. But still, I believe that white should be having quite a good counterplay, namely based on the weakness on a7. So what happened here? He traded the queens, rook d5, and then suddenly after rook a5, black started to experience some issues because now these pawns are becoming weaknesses. So he played c4, king f1, e6, bishop e3. Now this pawn is under attack. Bishop d4, rook d1, and it's already quite clear that white is playing for the win. because black is not in time to play bishop c5. I mean, maybe he could, but after bishop c5, rook takes on b5, takes, you probably need to properly evaluate this position. Probably it should be about equalish. Let's say something like check, take, and rook b7, something like this. But I imagine with accurate defense, black should be able to hold this. I mean, we still have to remember there were 12. There were only 12. So Carlsen played bishop e7. This move caused him a lot of grief. Now, after bishop d8, rook a2, b takes, rook b7 or rook b8 is incoming. So, as very typical for the positions, one mistake generates another, and Carlsen, maybe in time trouble, I don't really know, decided to go for a counterattack. He sacrificed an exchange and played c3. Now, his idea is to take on d4, play b4, play bishop b6, and from afar, it looks like an interesting idea. It really does. But the thing is, after a very accurate b4, black is simply not in time to take the pawn. After rook d4, rook c2, rook c4, rook b3, and black loses the pawn on c3 and is going to be struggling. I mean, probably already simply dead lost, because the rook is going to be a stronger piece than the bishop. So after b4, he tried bishop g5, still threatening with rook d4, but now after rook d1, rook c2, now the pawn on c3 is lost, because white is threatening with rook d3. Maybe even if, let's say, if black plays something like bishop d2, white can simply play king e2, threaten to take with the d rook, and the rook on the c file is going to be under attack. So what happened here is Carlsen played bishop e7, instead going after the b pawn so that he can organize two connected passed pawns, but it was time for Nepomniachtchi to play d5. Now e takes, rook d5, drops the pawn on b5, so he took on b4, d6, you have to go here, and rook b1. And that's it. This is how Ian Nepomniachtchi scored the first win at age 12 against Magnus Carlsen. Yeah, Confin, I think they played about of their level, more or less. Yeah, Nepomniachtchi was about 2300, Carlsen was less. Like I already said, Nepomniachtchi would remember this game as, at the time, nothing special. So he was playing some guy from Norway, right? From a country with sort of weird chess, not weird, but not really expecting from Norway to produce a lot of strong players. So that was quite strange at the time. Now, everybody, of course, knows that now since Magnus Carlsen, Norway has experienced a huge chess boom, but at the time, yeah, it felt weird. I mean, how come that there is a youngster, very talented player from Norway, right? So that was Nepo's thoughts, I mean, at the time, which he said in an interview. So Nepomniachtchi won the first game. Now, in the second game, they played, and it was a draw. I'm not going to show it to you. I think they played 1 month later at the World Championship. Again, they met against each other, and this time they finished with a draw. But the next game, which finished in a victory, was played in 2003, the next year. So this time they were playing in the World Championship under 14 in Halkidiki, Greece. And again, they were the big favorites of the tournament. As you can see, they already had pretty serious rating. I mean, Nepomniachtchi was 2447, Carlsen was even 2450. I mean, being only 13 years old, that is huge rating. So this time, Carlsen opted with the Sicilian, c3, the Sicilian Alapin, this is theory, d4, g6 is quite rare. So I don't know, probably this was some sort of a preparation by Carlsen, looking for a big fight. This is not the main move, as far as I know. So knight f3 was played, bishop g7, knight a3, c takes, and again, let's remember how Nepomniachtchi, at least he used to play before. He really liked some cheap tricks. I mean, nice tricks. So who knows, maybe the opponent is gonna fall into them. So he played bishop c4. Instead of taking the pawn on d4, something like c takes on d4, or maybe even knight b5, he plays bishop c4. Now the natural question is, what happens if black plays queen e4? And this did happen in the game. Queen e4 was played by Carlsen, and Nepomniachtchi responded with bishop e3. So you might think, wait a second, what is this? Is this a blunder? No, this is actually a trick. Because after d takes on e3, white can play bishop takes on f7, and knight g5 is killing the game, creating a fork against the king and the queen. So king f8 doesn't change anything because you can give a check and still deliver the fork. Of course, Carlsen saw all of this, but I think this was very typical of Nepomniachtchi playing like this and trying these tricks, at least early on. Knight h6 was played by Carlsen, very improvised play. Usually the knight goes to f6, but from h6 going to f5, usually the knight is challenging the bishop on e3 and the pawn on d4. So knight b5, more tricks are incoming. So d takes on e3 is going to be knight c7 and a mate on the board. So black gonna do it. He played here. And c takes on d4, really interesting. So white decided not to take with a piece, but voluntarily go for an isolated queen-pawn structure. And it's rather unusual, because normally for isolated queen-pawn structures, instead of the fianchettoing the bishop on g7, black has played e6, bishop e7, and knight f6. So with the bishop on g7 and the knight on h6, this is something unusual. Knight a6, yeah, this move makes no sense to me. I don't know what Magnus was thinking here. Why not something more human-like knight f5? Oh, wait, knight f5, there's knight c7 fork, but still, I think something like knight c6, the rook, knight c7, rook c8, rook b8 was making a lot more sense. So knight a6 is really defensive move against the knight c7 threat, but the knight on a6 now is sort of not in the game. Now also Nepomniachtchi responded with a slight mistake. He could have played queen b3 and keep the knight on a6 for as long as possible. But he played knight c3. Knight c3, queen c6, queen b3, knight f5, and shot castle. And here it was Carlsen's time to make a mistake. So this time they're actually stronger than in the previous game. They are now 13 years old. The best players naturally in the age group. Actually, the year of 1990 has produced so many great players. There's the Maxim Vachielograph, there's Dmitry Andreikin, there's David Havel. So many strong players born at 1990, so that age group was insane. So the competition was really, really tough. Here, I'm not sure what really happened again. I felt that more sense for black, it made something like knight c7 to improve this knight's position, and maybe play something like knight e6 next, or something like maybe even queen b6. So Carlsen's idea, he played queen b6 here. I think it was correct idea, but it was wrongly implemented. So what I think he blundered. So his idea was very simple: trade the queens and try to get to the pawn on d4, which is a target. I think he simply blundered. Takes, and knight a4. And I imagine that his plan was to play something like, I don't know, b5? I'm sorry, first it's, of course, knight e6, yeah, knight e6, bishop b3. And I think his plan was to play b5. But here he realized that after knight b6, rook b8, knight e5, the position is really unpleasant, really unpleasant. So the knight on a6 is out of the game. There's the knight e7 threat, there's bishop g5, bishop f4 threat, and this knight on a6 is not doing anything. So I think so, because normally you don't go for a line like this. You don't play queen b6 and then you give up the pawn just like that. It doesn't work like that. Usually there's an oversight. He saw something that he didn't see before, so he decided, okay, whatever, let's just drop the pawn. So he played knight e6 and played knight b4. Not the original plan, I believe, but at least black has some counterplay. Rook a6, knight e5, takes, and bishop f5. So Nepomniachtchi won a pawn, and he was looking in a great shape to score another win, but somehow Carlsen got an excellent counterplay. So white has the extra pawn, but his pieces are really clumsy here. The pawn on d4 is not really doing anything, so after a couple of moves, Nepomniachtchi was shuffling the pieces here and there, trying to find a way to crash through. Ultimately, they reach the following position. So white has sort of made some progress. He still has the extra pawn, he nicely controls the dark squares. Maybe he should play something like g5, which is a move which I really like, with some ideas to take a nice control of the dark squares, because the light square on f5 plays no role really. But what he did is he played b4, and I think this was a bit characteristic again to how Nepomniachtchi was playing at the time. He didn't really pay, I guess, too much attention to his opponent's ideas, and definitely he does it today, because he's one of the strongest players in the world, but he still remains incredibly fast. So if we compare the average speed of how quickly the leading players are playing the moves and how much time they spend, Nepomniachtchi is, if not the fastest player in the circuit, then one of the fastest. I mean, Carlsen also used to be a really fast player, but recently he's definitely investing quite a lot of time for the critical moments. So I would actually make a comparison, comparing Nepomniachtchi with Vishy Anand, because Anand also was a very fast player and very often seeing the right moves really quickly. Sometimes this would backfire. So here b4, white's idea is, just to establish a passed pawn. Seemingly black cannot do anything, and Nepomniachtchi I think he simply missed that black can sacrifice an exchange on d4, activating his pieces, and this is not a good idea for white to give black to do. So after the take, now the knight on e5 is under attack, the pawn on b4 is under attack, rook c8, rook e1, rook b4, h3. Now here arose a critical moment. Again, I don't know if there was a time trouble or not, but I think it was, because some of the decisions made by Carlsen could explain it. So here, Magnus played rook takes on a4, and this is probably a move which he would regret later. Now instead, I think he should have tried something else, maybe king e7, activating the king, going away from the pin. And now, after rook takes on a4, suddenly white unleashed an annoying attack with knight c4, threatening to win the bishop, and rook d1. And I think he simply missed this, because here white is threatening with rook c7 and knight e6. So for example, if black would play bishop c6, rook c7, king f6, and knight d6 starts to look really, really dangerous. If you would continue this game, still black is sort of okay after g5, knight f7, and king g6. But I imagine, being in a time trouble, this is very easy to miss, especially again since they're only 13 years old and still not playing really at the highest level. Obvious mistakes are still in their play. So here Magnus panicked. So he saw this idea of rook c7 knight e6. I would imagine running with the last seconds on the clock. He decided to sacrifice another exchange. He played rook takes on c4 and played bishop c6, clearly hoping for some kind of a fortress. Because indeed his position is very solid. If white is going to sacrifice an exchange on b7, it's going to be 4 pawns against 3 with a very good bishop on g7. This actually feels like a draw. It might as well be. I mean, I don't really know. But here, black had to sit and do nothing. So after f4, I guess white's idea was to activate the king. Here, Carlsen started actually unwillingly to help his opponent. He played f5 and took on g4. Because the idea is that when you are having a clearly worse position, what you're trying to do, you're trying to trade off as many pawns as you can. I'm pretty sure that Carlsen well knew it. He had excellent coaches. I mean, already at age 13, he perfectly knew this. But unfortunately for him, this opens the position too much. And after f takes, h5, this was his idea to trade off all of white's pawns and then still hope for this fortress. I think he missed something like this. And rook h5. So suddenly white's rooks become very active and black cannot keep everything together. Now rook d6 is threatening to win a pawn. Bishop d5 already is some f5 ideas. You cannot take the pawn because the bishop is under attack. Not even to mention that the king is in a potential mating net. So bishop e4 was played by Carlsen, rook c7, bishop d5, king e3, and after a couple of moves, Nepomniachtchi simply sacrificed an exchange, and with the f5 pawn, king d5, king e6, f6, he's easily winning because these pawns on h4 and b7 don't play a role. So that meant that in 3 games, the first 3 games they had played against each other, Nepomniachtchi was already leading with 2 wins. Now, the next game they played against each other with a score, opening a score for one of the players, was 8 years later. So now they were 13 years old. Now we switch, move on, jump in a time machine by 8 years, and we arrive in 2011. In 2011, Magnus Carlsen already was, I think he was the number 1 in the world, you know? I'm not really sure. I didn't check it. I mean, 2,800 already is a significant rating to be a leader in the rankings. Maybe at the time Vichy Anand or Vladimir Kramnik had a higher score, but I think I read somewhere recently that Carlsen has been the number 1 in the rating list for 10 years. So 2011, 10 years ago, maybe this is it. Either way, he was already one of the strongest players in the world with 28-14 rating, but not a world champion at the time. And they were playing against each other in Tata Steel Chess, one of the super tournaments. And this time Carlsen played a Najdorf. I mean, he was playing an open Najdorf chosen by Nepomniachtchi. You know, bishop e2, I think that's not a very ambitious approach. Now, the modern theory in Najdorf has moved on with incredible speed. There's so many continuations for white. I mean, white can play h3, which is a very popular move with ideas like g4, bishop g2. White can play f3 with the idea queen d2, long castle. White can play f4, g3, h4, a3, a4, bishop c4. Fischer's move, bishop c4, by the way. I mean, literally every single move there is possible. So, Carlsen played bishop e2, which is the old move. I mean, people used to play like this before, mainly in the World Championship matches of Garry Kasparov against Anatoly Karpov, when the Scheveningen structure was very popular. But okay, I mean, Nepomniachtchi played e5, which has been very popular in the last years. King h1, very typical idea, to play f4 at some point so that there's no possible checks for the king, and maybe the king on h1 is feeling a little bit better. Knight c6, f4, here, 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 and I think Magnus simply didn't really get out with the opening. So the way I see the Najdorf, this is the dream position for black, because black is very active at the queen side. Sometimes he's threatening to take on f4 and play knight e5, which actually happened in the game. There's many interesting ways how he can generate a game going at the queen side. So Carlsen played a4. So his idea was to provoke b4 so that he can play knight e5. Let's say something like knight takes on e4, bishop f3, and this looks really, really good for white, despite the fact that white has sacrificed a pawn. So his pieces are really active here. There's some bishop b6, knight c7 ideas. So this knight on e4 is not doing much. So I don't know, maybe something like knight c5, take, f5, something like this. Looks really interesting and dynamic. Now instead, Nepomniachtchi took on f4. Took with the rook. Yeah, I guess one of the ideas is to keep the bishop on this diagonal. I think bishop takes on f4 also is playable. But rook takes on f4 extra protects the pawn on e4 should black play now b4 and take the pawn on e4. So that's why rook takes on f4 sort of makes sense. Knight e5. Centralize the queen. And a repetition. So they repeated this position a couple of times. And one would think that Carlsen would have to accept, okay, I mean, this opening didn't really work for me. I have to repeat the position, agree to a draw. As you already know, threefold repetition in chess means that it's a draw. I mean, 3 times you repeat the position, it's a draw. Carlsen decided to fight. He took on b5 and played rook e1. I don't know, maybe rook a8, queen a8 was possible, but the pawn on b5 will be traded for the white pawn on e4. So there's the bishop, there's the knight, there's some bishop g5 incoming, etc. So black looks very active and he has an excellent pressure against white's center. So Carlsen played rook e1, some very deep idea with, I don't know, at some moment positioning the rook at the e file, and maybe the pawn on e4 will be indirectly defended. But what happened here is that after knight g6, pushing away the rook, b4, and knight takes on e4, Nepomniachtchi won a pawn. Hello. So after knight takes on e4, knight takes on e7, this seems to be necessary. Otherwise, queen b4, bishop d5, white drops the piece. Takes, and takes. And I think Carlsen went for this position from afar. So this was his idea. That's why he played rook e1. That's why he allowed knight g6, rook f1, b4, knight d5, etc., etc., etc. So they reach this position. He probably thought, okay, maybe he's not better, but the game at least is ongoing. Now, knight h4 was a very powerful idea by Nepomniachtchi, attacking the pawn on g2. I mean, maybe there's going to be some sacrifices. and discovered attack by the knight. I don't know, something like knight e2 or knight c3. It really depends. So bishop f3 was played by Carlsen. Takes, and seemingly everything is okay for white. Because, just a second, I have to take this call. Okay, I'll make a very short break. I'm gonna be still here. In a couple of minutes, I just need to take a package. Listen, yeah, I'm gonna be back. Don't go anywhere. Sorry about this. I have some arrival here. I just need to take it. So I'm gonna be back in a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere, and hopefully, we can resume it very quickly. Okay. Sorry about that. I'm back. I had the delivery I had to take. So where was I? Yeah, so the 2011 game between Magnus Carlsen and Ian Nepomniatchtchi. What did I miss there? Thank you, Monsopiad, for the subscription, by the way. Yeah, so here after g takes on f3, queen d7, this was the move missed by Magnus Carlsen. A very, very nice shot, because f takes on e4 seems to be an extra piece, but quite unexpectedly, black develops a deadly attack after rook a4. And I imagine from afar, this is very easy to miss. Yeah, because bishop takes on e4, queen g4, they're huge threats. For example, I don't know, how do you play? Something like queen d2, bishop e4, king goes here, queen g4. That's quite obviously a mate. So you couldn't do it. So I imagine when he went this entire sequence of rook e1, ding, 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 ding. Yeah, so queen d7, very easy to miss. So he had to play bishop f4, and now after rook a4, knight f6, black kept a very annoying pressure against the pawn on f3. So takes, queen g4. Naturally, black is not interested to trade queens, because bishop takes on f3 is always going to be a very annoying threat. Knight e4, takes, 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 and king g1. So seemingly we have about equal position, because it's 3 pawns each. It's bishop for white against black's knight. And if only white could somehow trade queens, then white would be better, because he has the bishop, he has connected passed pawns at the queen side, which might be used to queen. But the queens are on the board. Here's the thing, and white always will have to be really careful not to miss any checks or inspired attack. So Carlsen eventually lost the game thread. So he was trying to somehow solidify his position. h6, rook e6, f5, rook g6, and here we go. Some practical problems, because you always need to watch out for some mating ideas, mating net. Maybe knight g5, knight f3, some rook g2 ideas, some knight e2 something. And again, with the queens on the board, this is incredibly difficult for white to play. So ultimately, he lost the cool. He decided to sacrifice an exchange and try to salvage the game here. But after very powerful Nepomniachtchi's move queen d7, it's literally impossible for white to set up a defensive position which holds, because white wanted to play queen d3 to protect the bishop, to protect the pawns, and march forward them at the queen side. Now, white is not interested to trade queens, because these disconnected pawns will make easy target. They need to be connected. So h4, h5, queen d2, queen c3, and yeah, so eventually Nepomniachtchi collected both pawns and was able to win the game. Yeah, here finally he didn't really mind to trade queens, but rook d7, final accurate move, king g4, king h5, leading to easily winning possession. So this actually meant that Nepomniachtchi was leading Magnus Carlsen in classical games 4-0. 4-0, what an incredible score. And at the time, so this game was played, which year was it again? Yeah, 2011. Carlsen already was one of the strongest players in the world, but there was one player he could not really play against. I mean, okay, they had a lot of rapid blitz games and also Carlsen winning naturally, but in classical games, Carlsen had never won Nepomniachtchi before. So 4-0 at the time. And then came I'm sorry, this was the third game. What I'm talking about. This was the third game. Yeah, sorry. This was the third game, 3-0, and then came the fourth game. I already talked about what's going to happen. Then came the fourth game. In 2017, the London Chess Classic. Carlsen already was a world champion. So he just, I gave the result away. I'm sorry. No, I mean, I remember it was 4-0. I completely forgot that this was not the fourth game. It's because the courier. I forgot which game was it. So this is the fourth game. So Nepomniachtchi was leading now 3-0, and they played the next game, which finished with a win in 2017 London Chess Classic. Carlsen was the world champion. As you see, 28-37. Nepomniachtchi had slowly been climbing ranks. He's been solid 2700 player, 2730, 2740, etc. There were draws, and I'm going to show you draws as well, but at the moment I'm only showing the games which were decided with a win. And this time again, Carlsen plays with white. And c3. Now, quite interesting here is that Nepomniachtchi plays c5. And I guess this is where Carlsen decided to surprise his opponent. He played c3. Incredible move, which is usually played in blitz. The idea is to play d4. And the reasoning was that Nepomniachtchi is not a Slav expert. So after d4, c takes, we reach some kind of exchange Slav. And he didn't have the experience, so that's why Carlsen decided to play c3 right now. After d5, d4, c takes, knight c3, knight c6, we have completely symmetrical possession. And knight h5. What an amazing move. And the thing is, this is a secret draw offer. Nepomniachtchi knows that Carlsen will never agree to this. It's too principled between them. I mean, they're friends. Nobody's arguing, but they never have any boring draws. It's always a fighting draw. And the idea is push away the bishop from the diagonal. So bishop g3, I think black is very happy. Something like takes, g6. Put a bishop on the long diagonal. Black is just really, really comfortable. Now, if white plays something like bishop g5, you can play h6 and g5, which is essentially the same. So Carlsen decided, okay, I'm going to play bishop d2 and knight f6. Bishop f4, knight h5, draw. So this motif of knight h5, knight f6 is a very common idea. So Carlsen really had no choice. He had to play e3, e6, very careful move, because after bishop f5, knight e5, this could be a problem. So for example, I mean, black cannot really take. Takes, knight e4, and takes. And this looks extremely dangerous because of the bishop b5 and queen a4 check. So the pawn is not on a6 for black. And everything else is just worse. I mean, it's very difficult to defend against this threat. So if black doesn't do it, then g4 could become a problem. g4, g5. So that's why Nepomniachtchi played e6. He was very careful. Bishop d3, bishop d6. And here's the thing. So white has an extra tempo of bishop d2. What good does it do? Because the position is closed. So the only way for white to get the game going, it has to be e4. It has to be. Otherwise, we are going to see a boring draw. So Carlsen didn't have to be asked twice. He played e4, knight e4, and bishop e7. So white has gained an extra tempo with bishop d2, whose purpose is, I don't know, how really important. So it's a tempo. And this is a very classical, again, isolated queen's pawn structure. And if you're interested, actually, I did 2 videos about it in one of the previous boot camps, which are posted on my YouTube channel. IQP, I call them, which is an acronym for isolated queen's pawn structure. How to play with the isolated queen's isolated queen pawn structure and how to play against it. So I have 2 videos, so make sure to check it out. So here's the pawn on d4, IQP, because it's the queen's pawn, hence the name. So short castle, I guess this pawn on d4 is very risky to take. There's not immediately like a crushing win, it's just very risky. Takes, bishop c3, and white is so much ahead in development that serious players are rarely in the mood to really check this. I mean, looks too much. Rook d1, there's knight f6 and something. I mean, I understand, of course, a pawn is a pawn, right? But in modern chess, initiative is about everything. It's all about initiative. This is how I should have said. So Nepomniachtchi naturally didn't take the pawn. He played short castle, queen c2, still offering the pawn on d4. And this queen c2 is not very traditional move for the isolated queen's pawn structure, because usually white plays something like queen e2. And then tries, let's say, take on f6, queen e4, and try to get to the pawn on h7. But Carlsen had a very deep idea. He played queen c2 with the idea to provoke black to play h6, which might be a weakness. So after h6, rook d1, again indirectly creating some threats at the d file, should black be ever really interested in the pawn on d4. Bishop d7, a3, which is a traditional move, knight c3, very, by the way, typical move for the structure, because black is slightly cramped. So any trade normally should favor the defending side. So that's why knight c3. Black made Luft. I don't know what black made, but I mean, it's an ongoing, it's a normal position for both players. Here we go, queen c1. Now the threat is to play bishop h6 and some sacrifices. Rook e8. Now, probably the sacrifice is going to be too much, right? I mean, takes, queen h6, bishop f8, bishop g7, and black is just fine. No Luft on that diagonal. Yeah. So, after rook e8, rook e1, bishop f8, bishop f4. And you know, when you have a look at this position, it creates some sort of a feeling that white is better. Because white's pieces are better positioned. I mean, they're really harmoniously placed, and there's something about to happen at the king side. So, I mean, Nepomniachtchi doesn't really have a choice, right? He needs to generate some counterplay at the queen side. So he played b5. Some b4 ideas, I guess. Knight b4, maybe put the knight on d5, because one of the common themes in the isolated queen's pawn structures is for black, block the isolated pawn on d5 and trade off as many pieces as he can. So keeping the beautiful knight on d5. So queen d2 was played, b4, takes. And here actually Carlsen showed why he is the world champion. Because, I mean, if I would be playing this position with white, I would probably play bishop b1 without thinking. Because this is how they usually play. In the IQP positions, you keep the bishop alive, then you play something like knight e5, rook e3, rook g3, etc., etc., etc. But Carlsen showed a very interesting understanding. He felt the control of the dark squares is much more important than this last square bishop, which is really, really interesting. Very, very much thinking outside of the box. So after knight e5, takes. Here, Nepomniachtchi, and by the way, this is very characteristic, I think, to Ian, because he is very ambitious, very confident, and I think this is what makes him different, for example, in a playing style if we compare, for example, with Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, because Maxime Vachier-Lagrave is also one of the leading players in the world, but he often solves his positional problems with a pawn sacrifice. I mean, almost always. So if you feel that there's something wrong with your position, MVL just drops the pawn. very characteristic. So I've seen it so many times, right? So if MVL was playing here with black, he would absolutely play bishop b5. So again, we have a difference in the playing style. So for example, knight b5, bishop b5, takes, drop the pawn, and after knight e5, black has excellent compensation. So he is going to win back the pawn on b2 most likely, and then somehow the position is going to simplify. Rook b8, queen b6, something. And this pawn, I don't see how white is ever going to capitalize on the extra pawn. But Nepomniachtchi decided not to do it. And I think that's the difference in the playing style, because this means he would have to fight for the draw, although playing active chess. And now after a5, queen f3, suddenly white gets a very strong attack. And now black no longer has these bishop b5 ideas. There's something about to happen at the g5 at the f5, for example, some g4, h4, g5 ideas, g6. Things could get really nasty. Not even to mention maybe some d5 ideas. d5, knight e5, rook d5, the bishop on d7 is under attack. So black's pieces just are not positioned in a good way. So black had to play queen e7 in order to protect the pawn on f7 just in case and go away from this file. Then again, you need to understand what's happening after some moves like d5. Maybe not now, but a bit later. But he played bishop b4. And here Carlsen actually missed an amazing shot. He could have punished his opponent right away. He could have played bishop takes on h6, which is such a traditional shot that it's a bit unbelievable that he missed it. So after bishop takes on c3, and g takes on h6, check, and black king, I guess cannot go to f8. King f8 and rook d3. And this is too much. Or for example, king e7, queen g7. There's no way. There's no way that black is going to survive this. I mean, the attack is coming from all the sides, here, here. I mean, there's so many threats. These rooks are very, very nasty. And the king's in the middle of a very powerful attack. So if black doesn't do it, he plays something like bishop c6, queen f4. Some huge threats here. And c4. And the king has no shelter. It can never hide anywhere. So this was actually pretty easy. And if the king goes to h7, take, check. Maybe this is the idea which Carlsen missed from afar. I don't know. Maybe take on f7, going back with the knight on e5. And now the threat of queen g6, knight f7 should be really, really strong. So this could have been a victory for Carlsen. Now instead what he did, he played rook e3, which is a good move, but it misses the win. Take on c3, bishop a4 was played, rearranging the bishop to defense. And now the next critical moment arose here. After knight e7, Carlsen could have played c5. Take on e5, bishop d6, and this position is just great for white. Despite the fact that black has an outside pass pawn, white has really powerful pawns here. Rook a3 is incoming, so most likely the pawn on a5, I imagine, is going to be dropped. So black should be looking for some kind of fortress. Maybe trade queens, put the bishop somehow on d5, give up the pawn on a5, and just pray. Just pray it holds. I mean, there's no guarantee, obviously, but otherwise, white just plays rook a3, something like queen b6, wins the pawn. I don't see how black is ever gonna hold it. But Carlsen didn't play it. And check what happened here. And this is so uncharacteristic to Magnus Carlsen. He played knight c6. He saw a pawn. He took the pawn. And now after knight b6, he realized it's difficult to play. because black's pieces are very actively positioned. The knight on a5 is not doing much. The rook on a1, there's pawn on d4 hanging, by the way. So he played c5, and he blundered. He blundered simply rook takes on c5. Now, this was incredible for the world champ to blunder like this. This was depressing, and Carlsen just collapsed without a fight here. So even the position is still not lost. I mean, it was just, I guess, demoralizing completely. So what he did, he took on c5. And now, instead of taking on b6 and suffering this endgame 4 versus 3, he played queen c6, another blunder. And there's the saying, right, that mistakes come in pairs. So he's attacking the rook, he's attacking the knight. He wants to take on b6, and what he missed is queen a4. And that's it. Goodbye. Black has a double attack on the queen and the bishop. And there you go. So he had no choice. Take on a4. Resign. Just like that. So it was a complete collapse for Magnus Carlsen. And the first loss against Ian Nepomniachtchi being a world champion. And the final loss, I have to say. He never lost against Ian Nepomniachtchi being a world champion again. I mean, the classical games. So for Nepomniachtchi, this meant that he was leading now their games by 4 wins. 4 wins for Nepomniachtchi, 2 at the youth level, age 12 and 13. Okay, they don't count really. But in 2011, 2017, Nepomniachtchi already beat Carlsen twice, and Carlsen had never done it before. And then came the next game. 2019, Grand Chess Tour. Yeah, this was really shocking, really, because this is not Carlsen. This is not how he usually plays. It's so rare. But you know what it means? It means he's a human being. Unbelievable, right? But he's a human being. He also makes mistakes. He also has his bad moments. He just has them a lot less than everybody else. But he also tends to make mistakes, and against Nepomniachtchi, it was becoming very difficult to play. And then came the next game in 2019, when Nepomniachtchi was playing against Carlsen in the Grand Chess Tour in Zagreb. And if I remember correctly, it was a great year for Carlsen in Grand Chess Tour. As you see, rating also was soaring. Carlsen was getting to this highest rating ever, 2882, absolute record. 2875, it's a mind-boggling 100-point difference over one of the other strongest players in the world, clearly dominating the field. So, what happened here? Carlsen was playing black. And, of course, after the World Championship match against Fabi Caruana in 2018, where Carlsen started to play the Sicilian Sveshnikov and Rossolimo setups, etc. This was his main weapon in the World Championship match, which he had prepared against Caruana, and he continued to play it. So knight c6, knight c3, e5. This is theory. Bishop c4, but g6 is a rare move. So I don't know. I mean, usually they play something like Bishop e7, knight f6, d6, etc. But Carlsen was looking for something else, and he played the idea to rearrange the knight on e7, short castle, and after something like king h8, push f5. Now, Nepomniachtchi responded in a very nice way. He played d3, h6. Yeah, looks weird. What can I say? I guess knight g5 is an incoming problem. And h4. Really great move, because now h5 is a threat. Black is not really interested to play himself h5 because this allows to play knight g5. There's some issues. Knight on h6 is going to be misplaced, which cannot be said about the knight on g5. And black does not want to play f6 because it just completely ruins his pawn structure around the king. So he had to allow it. After h5, g5, knight h2. Now this reminds me of King's Indian. Was it Makagonov system? Fixing the pawn structure on the black squares for black and completely dominating the light squares. So Nepomniachtchi got a really excellent position right after the opening. Knight g4 and knight e3. A dream position. Short castle, bishop d2, king h8, black is threatening with f5, so g4. Very natural. The bishop on g7 is so terrible. Rook b8, threatening with some a6, b5, so a4. Knight e4, knight e5, takes. So far, Nepomniachtchi was completely in control. And now, something started to happen here. I don't know what, because maybe this is just not Nepomniachtchi. I mean, I don't know, because he usually plays really dynamic lines. And this type of position actually suits more to Carlsen. He got really nice control over some squares. So his opponent has not really well positioned pieces. So if I would be looking at the position, I would totally say that this is Carlsen playing with white and Nepomniachtchi playing with black. And from here on, things started to go wrong for Nepomniachtchi. I mean, I don't know what happened here. First he played f3. I mean, this is a move which I don't really understand. Is this necessary or not? I think something like short castle and then maybe had the king on h2 probably made more sense, being not afraid of any sacrifices, so that the king already is tucked away on h2. f3, I'm not sure if this move always helps, but okay, not an actual mistake. Now the next move, another weird move, was queen b1. The idea is to play queen a2, but I think c3, queen b3 made more sense, at the same time fighting for the d4 and b4 squares. Okay, so he played queen b1, queen a2, some rook g1. Yeah, I guess he already started to be afraid of the incoming sacrifices on g4, but this is why I said I think he had to start with the short castle and hide away the king on h2, because let's say if white had already made a short castle, played king h2, now he could simply play rook g1, and the king is feeling safe on h2. Now the king is not feeling very safe on e1. b6, bishop c3, I don't understand this move. Where's the idea of this move? Maybe white already doesn't have a lot of choices, because he's not really interested to take on f4. Because black will respond with e takes on f4, for example, takes, and this bishop becomes very active. And it used to be such a terrible piece on g7. So Nepomniachtchi played bishop c3, maybe preparing to take on f4 at some moment, I don't know. So that's why Carlsen took on d5, so that Nepomniachtchi is not threatening knight f4, g takes, and reaching some kind of a better position. Now he went back, b5, the king finally runs, and here Carlsen felt that he can try to take over the game. He played c4, aggressively, trying to open the position, because the white king is on f2, knight x on d5 is threatening maybe some e4, bishop d4 ideas, and Nepomniachtchi just collapsed here. So he played first bishop takes on f4, which I don't think was his original plan, to open the bishop. It looks weird. E takes on f4, now this bishop is very much alive. Rook d1, and Carlsen clearly felt the momentum that he can try to inflict some damage here, because he was having this not great position after the opening, and now he has this active bishop on g7. The white king is sort of weak, so he gambled and played f5. Now, after f5, e takes on f5 had to be played, but I imagine Nepomniachtchi was really concerned about this move. Check, check. Have I done a YouTube video on Rosalino? Yes, I have. Yes, I have. It's another boot camp. Some time ago. You can check my playlist of the GM Neiksans Boot Camp. I don't remember which edition was it. I think it was one of the first ones. I don't really remember. So rook f2 is impossible because the rook on d1 is under attack. So you have to go here and c takes on d3. You cannot take with the rook. This is under attack. I think Nepomniachtchi saw ghosts. I think so. I mean, otherwise I cannot explain it. This looks scary. It looks super scary. Rook c2 is incoming. And maybe there's some bishop d4, bishop f2 ideas. I don't know. Although the engine says this is just a draw. Something like rook e1. And to be honest, it's not really clear why it should be overly concerned, because black is not going to be in time to play rook c2. Either way, very sharp position. But what happened here was unbelievable. G takes on f5, and I think you can make a parallel with the same blunder that Carlsen played in previous game. The c5, rook takes on c5, then blundering the piece with queen c6, and here happens something similar. Now, Nepomniachtchi suddenly believed that he has to close the center, keep the center closed, and play g takes on f5, and now g4, black has a killing attack. There's nothing white can do, and that's it. I'm not sure what he even missed. Maybe, I don't know, I mean, rook h1 maybe? Check? Take? But this is lights out. I mean, this is such a huge attack. With opposite color bishops on the board, this is essentially an extra piece. Bootcamp number 4. Okay, you found it. Okay. So he played d4 to stop bishop d4, and now the queen comes in. Check. Check. And take. Resigned. Because king takes on f3, queen h5, drops the rook on d1, and king e1, queen g1 is a lovely mate on the board. You know, when I look at this position, I just cannot understand how you can make a move like g takes on f5. So this is nerves. This is nerves. Or maybe sometimes the hand makes the other move which you clearly thought which is impossible, because g4 is such an easy move especially for these guys, so it's not even clear what he missed. So it must be some sort of a psychological problem. Something just I don't know, a short circuit happened in the brains at the moment. I don't know, but I think this was pretty much delivering back the previous point which was gifted by Magnus. So finally Carlsen scored the first victory, and up to the day this remains the final game. Maybe he was low on time, I don't know, but you still cannot play g takes on f5 because g4 is so obvious. It's so obvious. I don't know how you can miss that. After e takes on f5, this actually made more sense, so I don't know what happened there. Must be some hallucinations. There's always the hallucinations. You never know what ghost you are gonna see, right? And so currently the score after this game was 4-1. So finally Carlsen had scored his first victory. The final victory, the final game which ended with a victory between two players. No, g4 is easy. I mean, I see it. It's easy threat. For these guys, this is piece of cake, so I cannot explain what happened here. Just some short circuit. Sometimes this happens, like with Carlsen, right? The previous game he played c5, blundering rook c5, then blundering the piece with queen a4. This just sometimes this happens. This happens. Easy, hard for mortals, but easy for James. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. So then came the final two games, and these games they played in September. The final two classical games between Magnus Carlsen and Ian Nepomniachtchi, they played in Norway Chess in September, just 2 months before the World Championship match, which starts next Friday, as I imagine you should already be aware of. I mean, chess.com and all of the other competing sites are going to produce top-notch commentary. So, what happened in this game? Yeah, what happened in this game was first time. I mean, in the classical games at least, I didn't check any rapid and blitz. First time Carlsen decided to test the infamous Berlin system. After d4, knight e6, takes, d takes on e5, and this system was brought to fame, or shame, I don't know, really, by Vladimir Kramnik in year 2000, when he was playing the World Championship match against Garry Kasparov. And as already history tells you, Kasparov lost the match without winning a single game. And Kramnik played the Berlin over and over and over. And there was nothing that Kasparov could do. Being such a creative player, he was being forced to play the Berlin over the time. So that was absolute victory by Vladimir Kramnik. I think actually this deserves a special boot camp. Some of the Kasparov matches, definitely, I think this is something I could do in the future. So, I mean, this inevitably leads to an endgame where black gets two bishops, but okay, the king walk is not really so important because white is unable to exploit it, but has double pawns. And in theory, white's plan is to trade off as many pieces, mainly these terrible bishops, and try to push forward the pawns to establish an extra pawn, so to speak, at the king side. Because this one sort of is irrelevant. Now, I don't know how actual is this theory. Yeah, I mean, bishop e6, bishop c8, bishop e7, h5, knight h4. You know, this I think deserves a special, again, boot camp to explain why the Berlin system is played the way it's being played. But the bottom line is it's great for black. So Carlsen was trying to establish some pawn majority at the king side. Black was getting very active bishops, very active g5, g4, and around here, I think already it should be quite apparent that white did not manage to create two connected pawns, and black should be having an excellent game because of the, mostly I guess because of the light scored bishop. So b6 is a very traditional move, rook d8, trading couple of rooks, bishop d8. The king feels just fine on e8. Yeah. Thank you, folk. Appreciate that for your sub. So h4, you know, I'm not sure about this h4, was this a good idea or not, but then again, I mean, g4 opens, I guess, the position for black, and now the rook is very active here. Bishop c8, something like knight e5, rook h3, and it's not even clear if white is very happy about the position, because this pawn on g4 is under attack by the bishop on c8. So about the Berlin, probably I would have to invite an expert to tell about all of the nuances. What are the main ideas of Berlin? Because I don't play it myself. I've always felt like Berlin, yuck, right? I mean, it's a boring endgame. But on the other hand, the more I'm getting older, the more I understand from chess. I start to understand the practical side from that endgame. So maybe actually I should study it, because it's a wonderful way to kill the Ruy Lopez and to kill e4. So I mean, why not? Why not? So that's why it's so popular and incredibly difficult to break through. So Carlsen played h4 to fix the weakness on h5, but now the g4 square is gone forever. So he would love to trade the dark square bishops, somehow remove them from the board, but how to do it? So they shuffled a couple of times here and there, but There was just no progress to be made. Yeah, here bishop g5 Carlsen finally found a way to trade it, because bishop f8, c4 could be some major problems because of the mate on d1. So he finally found it, but black is just in time to take on f3. Takes. So white has already achieved a lot, meaning he has the pawn majority at the queen side, at the king side, and this double pawn is seemingly stopped. But because of the pawn on h4, he cannot create a passed pawn. If Berlin is refutation of the Lopez why not play Italian, I didn't say it's refutation. It's just a very annoying weapon. And of course, there's so many players at the highest level who are consistently playing it, who are consistently demolishing it. For example, look Maxime Vachier-Lagraf's games. For example, he was playing the Grand Swiss against Tabata Bey. Check it. I mean, you're gonna see that black can be crushed. If he makes one mistake, that's it, it's game over. So Maxime, by the way, is, I believe, one of the biggest experts who is playing it from the white's perspective over and over and over. It's quite unbelievable. So I guess he really trusts in this opening, but so does black, right? Yeah, it's not really lifeless. Yeah, I wouldn't really say that. They all miss b4 somehow. You mean the Evans Gambit? They don't miss it. It's just not a very good opening. I mean, you can play it, but it's not a very good opening. So this game finished in a draw. So there's no way to progress. The rook on g6 is against the rook d6 threat. Otherwise, white will play rook d6, rook h6, etc. And here, I guess this is just risky for white. Something like a5, then you go here, I'm gonna activate the rook somehow, rook d6, rook d2, etc. So that is set the repeater position, and the game finished in a draw. And this was the penultimate game, the classical game they played against each other in September. And now comes the final game. What about bishop's opening? Yeah, bishop's opening is good. The bishop's opening is good, I guess. But mainly the bishop's opening is played in order to avoid the Petrov. So e4, e5, slightly diverting from the original topic. Since some people at the highest level are so have such a great respect for the Petrov, because now you simply have to take on e5 or play d4, and black has excellent position, usually, to hold it. So that's why some people start with bishop c4 to avoid it, and then they play d3, and if knight c6, then knight f3, they are playing the Italian, so they avoid the Petrov. But usually black is not really complying and playing c6, and this is the bishop's opening. Anyway, in the final game, they did play the Italian opening and d4. So this was definitely a preparation by Nepomniatchtchi, looking for a fight. d4, e takes, e5, d5, bishop b5, knight e4, c takes. This is still theory. And Carlsen plays exactly as I play myself with black. There's a choice, bishop b6 or bishop b4. I play bishop b6 myself. Knight c3, short castle, bishop e3. So white's idea is usually try to fight for the strong pawn center. For example, he plays knight c3, bishop e3. He wants to force black to take on c3, and he will have a pawn majority in the center and maybe some potential to organize a kingside attack. Because for example, after something like knight takes on c3, b takes on c3, this black pawn on b7 doesn't really feel really such an important pawn. And the white pawn on e5 does. It's an extra pawn in the center. Bishop g4, h3, queen c2. Yeah, this is some theory. There's a piece sacrifice, I believe. after, what was it? Takes, knight g5, bishop c6, knight f3, king e2, takes, and I don't remember. I don't remember. There was some piece sacrifice for a lot of pawns for black, but I guess it's fine for black or white, I don't know. So Carlsen decided to play knight x on c3, f6, and queen f6. But this position usually is considered to be slightly worse for black. Why is that? Because, like I said, this extra pawn on b7, I mean, what an extra pawn? I mean, the pawn on b7 at the queen side, which is giving black the pawn majority, feels rather insignificant. And on the contrary, if I play something like knight e5, g4, f4, f5, he has a very powerful extra pawn at the king side. So, plus the bishop on b6 is slightly misplaced. I mean, it's not doing anything, it's just staring at the pawn. So knight a5, bishop f3, c6, Carlsen solved his opening problems. Queen g6, offering a trade. And here, after queen e6, I felt that white has achieved something because he has the two bishops and he has a pawn majority at the king side. I mean, it's not much, right? Because black is super solid. Black is going to play something like bishop c7, bishop d6, build a brick wall and try to hold it. But still, I cannot explain the next move by Nepomniachtchi. I mean, sometimes I don't understand it, but I guess, I mean, naturally they're playing at a different level, much different level. I'm a grandmaster myself, but sometimes when I'm seeing those moves, I think I can only explain it is that they already think another level. Sometimes so deep that they forget to make the simple good moves. Meaning, looking at this position, I think the first natural move which comes to my mind is bishop d3. It just has to be. I mean, bishop d3, activating the bishop. Oh yeah, sorry, wrong. Activating the bishop, maybe putting the rook, putting the queen, something like g3, h4, etc. And this is a long-term pressure. But I imagine that, of course, Nepomniachtchi saw all of this, what I'm talking about here. But I imagine he was already taking it to a different level, that he realized that this is too simple, that there's not going to be enough, and probably Carlsen is going to hold it. And that's why instead he decided to change the character, took on c4, and grabbed the e-file. I mean, I don't understand it really, because black is super solid in order for this to work, because also queen e7 is impossible because of the pawn on f2 falls. So Carlsen played bishop a5, queen e3, h6, and I guess around here Nepomniachtchi realized, I mean, not really realized, he probably saw this from afar, that queen e7 is never going to be impossible because the pawn on c3 is going to be under attack. So he played some moves, which I don't really understand, and offered the draw. That was so strange, so clearly something had gone wrong for him. Actually, I think this position I would choose to play with black, and it was a bit surprising that Carlsen decided not to continue, because there's no way he can be worse. These pawns are positioned at black's dark square bishop's color. White has a pawn majority at the king side, but the king is also weak, so maybe even something like c5 might be an option. So I don't think this position black is ever risking something. But anyway, I mean, Carlsen agreed to the offered draw, so I can only guess why Nepomniachtchi made this anti-positional move, bishop takes on c4. There must have been some deep idea which I don't understand really. So must be something linked with taking over the e-file, and then he missed or misevaluated the counterattack against the pawn on c3. I mean, I don't understand it. So that was the final game they played against each other. Magnus Carlsen and Ian Nepomniachtchi have played many games online. They have played many drawn games. Maybe let me check if there's some really exciting game which I might have missed, because that's essentially what I wanted to show to you. Let me check it. So these games I showed. A lot of the games they played against each other. No, I don't think I'm gonna show you anymore. So a lot of the games they played against each other, they involve a lot of dynamics. One of the sides is sacrificing a pawn or an exchange and then trying to either capitalize on that. And usually it's very fast paced. And this actually makes me question what we could expect from this World Championship. So as you already know, it starts next Friday. I mean, technically next Wednesday. If you are looking for all of the information, you can find it in this link. Chess.com has written an amazing article which contains all the information, the schedules, the prize fund, the time control, naturally the start with the games, which is, what was it again? 1 p.m. Central European Time. Hello, Digital Hobo. Yeah, so I'm not sure what to really expect. What is quite clear is they've had teams who have been working on this match for months. And it's quite sure that both of them have prepared surprises in the opening. I assume that if not both of the players, one of the players will play a new opening, something new, something which was not expected. So, for example, for the World Championship match against Fabiano Caruana, Carlsen started to play Vasiliy Sveshnikov, which was a surprise. I don't think he played it before. Maybe I'm mistaken. In the past World Championship matches, challenger has started to try to attack early. No, I think Jan is going to choose the right moment. I don't think he's going to go guns blazing every single game. In order to beat Carlsen, if that is even possible, you need to be super smart. And I'm sure he has done a lot of analysis on the 2016 World Championship match against Sergei Karyakin. You remember how Karyakin almost beat Carlsen with his boring playing style. He was just boring. I mean, getting Magnus bored. Every single game was e4, e5, e4, e5, e4, e5, e4, e5, e4, e5. Unbelievable. Italians, Fry Lopez's, Italians, Fry Lopez's. It was so boring in terms of the openings. And I imagine that Carlsen just got crazy by making so many draws, and he maybe risked it a bit too much. Then he lost the first game, and it could have been over because Karyakin was very close to winning the second game in a row, and he did not, and Magnus managed to fight back. So definitely Nepomniachtchi has learned something from that match, so I'm curious what kind of strategy he's going to choose. I don't think he can even play boring. This is not Nepomniachtchi. But history has shown that you can get excellent results if you adapt to your opponent. And the question is how exactly Nepomniachtchi wants to outplay Carlsen. Maybe he's just going to play how he plays. That's completely understandable. He's going to prepare some surprises, etc. And he's going to just show for just hope for the best. But for example, if you look back at the history, Alexander Alekhine, when he was playing his match against Jose Raul Capablanca in 2000, I'm sorry, what 2000? 1927. Okay, that's an ancient history, of course. But he specifically studied his opponent's games and tried to copy his playing style. I mean, Alekhine, he was a very brilliant, sharp player. And he started to play really technical chess, exactly like Capablanca, because he realized he has no really options to beat him. When Mikhail Tal beat Mikhail Botvinnik in 1960, he surprised his opponent with his brilliant attacking style, sometimes unsound sacrifices, and Botvinnik was surprised by this approach. 1961, it did not work anymore, because Tal, I guess, didn't take the preparation too seriously, and Botvinnik this time was well prepared, had done his homework, and convincingly won the match. So I wonder what they have chosen for the match strategy. There's no way to tell. I mean, I would not be surprised, for example, if Carlsen with black will start to play a Petrov, for example. Now this would be something, because pretty sure that Nepo is going to be ready against Sveshnikov. Carlsen could try to switch to the Rai Lopez, but while it's pressing, so I think it makes a lot of sense for both players do their homework and prepare some kind of a surprise. So something like Petrov, if that's even can be considered to be a surprise, I think this is definitely something that they were considering. So I don't know. So what they're going to choose, I guess we are going to find it out. Yeah, so really, really exciting. No, King's Gambit. He's never going to do it. He's never going to play King's Gambit. Maybe he could play in a tiebreak when desperate. It could be Berlin. It could be Berlin. That's also a possibility. If you're talking from both players' perspective, they already played it before. And I would not be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if one of the players is playing either the Berlin to hold it and have some active counter chances, or the Petrov, e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6. Don't expect with black some super sharp openings. I think that's my humble opinion. I think you cannot expect something sharp like the French, like, I don't know. Maybe suddenly Nepo is gonna start to surprise everybody and start to play Karakan. There could be a lot of possibilities. But of course, there's no telling if Carlsen will even play e4. Yeah, so I can only imagine this amazing amount of preparation that their team had to do. Imagine yourself. I mean, they're hiring a bunch of grandmasters, right, who have been working for them for months. They're trying to prepare some surprises. They're trying to figure out what are the weaknesses in their opening repertoire. Obviously, trying to spy on the opponent, trying to get some inside information, etc., etc., etc. Now, this is going to be interesting. Neither of... You know, I think it really depends what kind of strategy they're going to choose. I think where essentially the World Championship match has changed, like nowhere else, black is playing solid. It's either e4, e5, then either Rai Lopez or the Berlin or the Petrov. You're trying to get a draw with black, because usually everybody is relying on the white color. Carlsen surprised, and he was playing the Sveshnikov with c5, knight c6, and I think this time Nepomniachtchi is going to be ready for that. Maybe Favi was not ready for this, but Nepomniachtchi is going to be ready for this. So I think it's going to be some e4, e5. But maybe Nepomniachtchi is going to play just d4 or c4 or something. I don't know. It's very, very difficult to tell. We can only be guessing. Yeah, maybe some Ra Lopez exchange for certain games, something which the opponent is not expecting. All right. So, again, the match opens next Wednesday. A wild guess. Could be Slav. You know, but we could guess about it all day, but also quite important is for the players to play positions which they feel, and this is something which you cannot teach. Meaning, let's say I'm studying a certain opening. Let's say I'm an Idol player, and I've studied Petrov to perfection. I've studied. I know everything in Petrov, but I have no practice. So I have not played practice. I did not play in tournaments. I did not play in Blitz. Did not play anywhere. So maybe I would not be surprised that they have created secret accounts online. And I know GMs are doing this. They're creating secret accounts online in order to test how it feels. For example, if I have prepared a certain opening with Black, I'm going to play the Petrov. I definitely want to test it. Of course, some sparring matches with my coaches, with my team, it's really nice, but I need to test it. I need to physically feel the positions, feel the nuances. Maybe I'm going to find something which I didn't prepare. So that's very a common strategy to create not a fake account, but a secret account. And I talked with some grandmasters during the Grand Swiss. I won't mention who. And they said that some of the top players have even several accounts, several secret accounts. I'm not sure why you need several accounts, but at the same time, I guess you couldn't really play super strong secret openings. Everybody sees you are 3,300, then naturally everybody will start to guess you're either Magnus Carlsen or Ian Nepomniachtchi, right? So I guess maybe play something like 10, 20 games against selected players, anonymous, create another account to play against so that you're not drawing attention. Actually, I once did this. I was asked to play a sparring match first against one Grandmaster, then against the second Grandmaster as a part of the preparation. So we were playing out specific opening. So we played specific opening, we played it anonymous, played unrated, nobody even noticed. So I think they're definitely doing a lot of these things, and we are gonna see. And Nepomniachtchi, he used to be quite lazy when it comes to the preparation. He's never tried to hide it. He's been very open about it. But he has to start to work seriously on chess in the last years. So naturally, his talent is on the level of Magnus, for example, like Firuja. He's, I think, one of the geniuses. Otherwise, you couldn't be at the top. So with some hard work, this is going to be exciting. And what can I say?